paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. And I got to tell you guys, right at the moment, outside, it's a little stormy. It's windy. You may hear the wind from time to time because it gusts pretty good up there. So basically, it's a dark and stormy night. And I have to have a good ghost story for a dark and stormy night, right? Well, this time, not only have I got a great story, I'm going across the pond again to get it. You guys know I've had folks from England, Canada, Australia before. Well, this one here, this is right up my alley. William C. Graves is the author of The Lady in the Bay Window. And 2004, he purchased a house in Sheffield, England that was incredibly haunted. Imagine for a second, you're driving up to visit your friend at his nice house, and up in stairs in a window, there's a lady just staring at you that nobody knows who she is. And if that don't creep you out, get up one morning, come downstairs and find knives stuck in the floor. Buried into the oak. So he's lived through a lot here, and we're going to be talking a little bit about it. I also want to just bring up right now, we'll discuss it more. This book is available on Amazon, and every penny he makes goes to the Cavendish Cancer Care charity. And he has raised all kinds of money for these folks out of this story. And I want him on here to tell his story to us. So let me introduce you to William C. Graves. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Dan. How are we?
Not bad. Not bad. How's the weather over there?
Pretty cold. Pretty cold this time of year.
Yeah, you guys get used to cold and rainy weather, right?
Yeah, we certainly do.
Oh, but you guys have such great ghost stories, and yours has got to be one of the top of the ones I've read. You bought a house in 2004 that was just incredibly haunted.
Yes.
Tell the story. This is your story. I want you to tell it.
Yes, certainly. So basically, at the time, I was a 19-year-old fresh-faced lad. This was 19 years ago, pretty much to the day. I purchased the house because we'd actually purchased another house up the road. It was my fiance and myself at the time. Found a house in Sheffield. It was 5 minutes away from my mum and dad's house, and it was quite a nice house. Unfortunately, the deal fell through, and this house came on the market the next day. So my fiance phoned me while I was at work and said, there's a house very similar to that house. It's just gone up for sale. It's 5 minutes away from your mum and dad's property. It's a nice house. Do you want to go and have a look at it? Now, within a month, my offer had been accepted. We were moving into this house, and it needed a lot of TLC on the outside, but it was quite a cozy, nice house on the inside. Now, it's a 3-bed semi-detached house, and it's got very high ceilings. You can probably see in the background, very high ceilings in this house. It's not the biggest house in the world, but it's got very high ceilings. But the week before I moved in, as you mentioned, it was November. I actually moved in December, but the end of November, I'd got the offer accepted. A friend of mine basically came to pick me up to go on a works Christmas outing with all my work colleagues. He drove to my mum and dad's, he picked me up, and he said, when I got in the car, did you get the offer accepted on the house? And I said, yeah, it's all been accepted. He said, can we go and have a look at it? I'd like to see where it is. So we drove down it's quite a steep road, 5 minutes away, driving down the road. He pulled up on the left-hand side of the road, and he said, which one is it? I said, it's that one there, it's number 333. And he sort of bent down and he looked up at the house, and he sort of bent across to have a look across me, and he pointed up and he said, that one there? I said, yeah, that's the one, number 333. He said, who's the old lady in the window? And I'm looking at it. So I'm looking up at the house. I'm looking up at the large bay window at the top of the house, and I can't see anybody. So I sort of looked at him again and questioned him, and he said, there's a lady staring at us now in the window. Now, I knew the house had been renovated for the last 6 months. It had been empty and it had been renovated. There's no furniture in there. There's no carpets. There's no curtains up in there. So there shouldn't be anybody in that property. And I quizzed him as we went down the road, and I said, what did this so-called old lady look like? And he said she was probably in her 80s. She had a grey short perm. She had a dark cardigan, a white blouse, and a real piercing stare. She was kind of stood with her arms on the bay window, leaning, looking at us outside a house like she didn't want us to be there. And at the time, I was 19 years old. Nothing paranormal's ever happened to me. So I'm a skeptic. I just kind of brushed it off and thought, nothing of it. A week later, I get the keys to the property and I wanted to move in straight away. My fiance at the time said, I'm not moving in until we've got carpets and furniture and all that sort of stuff. And I invited 5 very good friends round who had known since my school days. They came round in their droves at about 7 o'clock that evening. I was sat in the house on my own until 7 o'clock, just having a sort of look around at what I was going to do with my new property. And we sat down and decided to play Monopoly and have a beer and play Monopoly between the 6 of us. And as we were sat there, there's a little alcove in the front room. So there's sort of 2 doors, one into the front room from the front door, and then a door into the kitchen from there as well. And there's a little alcove in the corner. And a good friend of mine sat across the board from me. He looked over his shoulder. This was about 2 hours into the game. He looked over his left shoulder and then completely freaked. And he scrambled across the board towards me, knocked me out of the way, and he got into the corner of the room and he sat in a fetal position, sort of holding his legs like a child. And he was 19 years old. I mean, he's a big strapping lad as well. I'm 6'4". He's a little bit shorter, but very stocky.
Okay.
And he was holding his legs and shaking, and he'd gone deathly pale, his eyes sort of bulging out of his head. I said, what's going on? There was a lot of commotion because there was beer spilt everywhere in the front room and the game had been ruined. And I just said, what's going on? And he couldn't speak, couldn't get his words out. So I picked him up and I took him away from the commotion into the kitchen. I stood with him and said, just tell me what's gone on. And he said, did you not see her? I said, who? And he said, and he really struggled to get his words out. He sort of stuttered and said, there was an old lady sat on an invisible chair staring straight at me. Now, if there was an old lady sat in that corner, I would have seen her because I was looking in the direction he looked over his shoulder.
Right.
I didn't see her. Nobody else in the room saw her. But he said, and he was adamant, that he'd seen an old lady sat on an invisible chair staring at him.
Sitting on an invisible chair.
Yeah, and I just said to him at the time, just tell me what this old lady looked like.
Yeah.
He said she was sort of probably in her 70s, 80s. She had grey permed hair, a dark cardigan, a white blouse, and a long sort of dressy black skirt. And she had a real piercing stare. And it was pretty much the same description that the guy Craig from my work had described the week before. Now, these guys don't know each other. This was a work colleague and a friend from school. They didn't know each other. They couldn't have sort of spoken about the stories beforehand to creep me out.
Right.
And this was the second sighting of a lady that we've come to know as, I believe, Mrs. Tompkins. Well, that's what I've called her in the book. I've had to change all the names and addresses in the book due to the nature of it. But yeah, that was the second sighting of 5 sightings that we've had of the same old lady by 4 different people who don't know each other, couldn't have spoken to each other beforehand, and I've still not seen her. I've seen and witnessed things in the house, and I've heard voices and things. I've had a coin thrown at me. There's the knife situation you spoke about before. There's loads of things that have happened over the years. Hence the reason I've written a book about all the true stories that have happened.
The shadows you've seen them under the door. Have you seen them other than that, just walking down the hallway or anything?
No. So we've seen shadows, particularly under one specific door. And I'm a skeptic with an open mind now because I have seen things in this house that I cannot explain. And that's where the paranormal comes in, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm very intrigued in it all now. And people sound crazy for living here, but
it ain't hurt you.
It's my home, and I've been here 19 years. I love the place, and it intrigues me now. Not so much my wife; she's quite freaked out by it all. But yeah, the shadows. I've seen them. There's been multiple witnesses see them at the same time, under the door, mainly at the bottom of the stairs, and then we've heard footsteps walk away as the shadow has sort of gone away past the door and up the stairs. We've heard the footsteps go up the stairs, open a door at the top of the stairs, turn the door handle. We can hear all that. There's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just weird, and every time you try to investigate it, so if I hear the footsteps now, for instance, on the staircase, if I open that door, the footsteps will stop. As soon as you try and investigate it, it stops straight away. It's so strange.
So this is an intelligent haunting. She knows what she's doing.
100%. There's actually a story in the book, and I've just been doing the audiobook earlier today. And one of the chapters in there that I was reading is about one particular night where my brother shouted, "Stop this now," when the footsteps were really creeping out. Really, he's a big guy, but this really creeps him out, this house. And he shouted, "Stop this now, you are freaking me out." And it stopped straight away. It just completely stopped. So it's not a residual haunting. I've read about all these things now. It's not stone tape theory. It's not that sort of thing. It's definitely an intelligent spirit or spirits, as I've been told.
Do you think she wants you out of there?
I genuinely don't think she does. Now, in the book, there's 25 stories of true events that have happened to myself and other people. And at the end, I asked a locally renowned medium to come to the house. Being quite skeptically minded, I didn't tell him my name or the full address. I just told him, "I'll wait outside the house. Phone me when you're in the area, and I'll direct you in." He believes there's a lady here, an old lady, and he said there were 4 spirits here, but the 2 main ones was a lady and her partner who died years before her, back in the 70s, 80s, he believes. The man is supposed to be quite a mean spirit, mean-kindred spirit. He's not the nicest, and the reason why he's not nice is because he's looking for his partner and he can't find her.
Okay.
The lady seems very home proud, but I don't think she likes having women in the house. There's been a few stories about the sightings that involve women, that she doesn't seem to like women here.
And we've talked about that just before we started the recording, because it just struck me as that the fact that she seems to get a little more violent. You had a woman in the house when the knife incident occurred, right?
Yeah. So I had a lady I used to rent the rooms out to. So the relationship with my fiance when I first bought the house only lasted for 4 months, and we went our separate ways, and I kept the house. So I used to rent the 2 spare bedrooms out to friends and family through the years. And I'm now married, been with my wife now for 11 years. But before that, the rooms were pretty much rented out all the time. It's like a revolving door. As somebody moved out, somebody else moved in. When this lady moved in, there was nobody else renting the room. She moved in on her own. It's actually this room that she rented that I'm in at the minute, where we were talking. And I threw a little bit of a house party for her. I was in my early 20s. I don't do that sort of stuff anymore. But yeah, I threw a bit of a house party for her. And the next morning when I got up, I came downstairs and the front door had been left ajar. Now, I know a friend of a friend slept on the settee the night before, and I heard him leave at about 9 o'clock in the morning. I heard the black cab pull up outside. They're quite noisy, taxis. I heard that pull up outside. I heard him leave, and I heard him slam the door. Now, the keys were in the back of the door. But as I got up about 11 o'clock, a little bit hungover, I walked to the top of the stairs, and I looked downstairs and saw that the door was left ajar. And my first thoughts weren't that it's paranormal. I just thought somebody's broken into my house. Now, I live in quite a nice neighborhood. I've never touched wood. I've never had any issues in the last 19 years with anything apart from the paranormal stuff. But I walked downstairs, and as I opened the door, I looked outside and saw that the lady who rented the room, a handbag was sort of strewn outside and all the contents everywhere across the floor. And I ran upstairs and grabbed her and said, "Can you come downstairs and make sure that nothing's been stolen out of your handbag?" My car was still there. So if it was somebody who'd broken in, surely they'd probably take your car, I would have thought. I mean, I'm not a robber, but I would have thought it was the most valuable thing. My car was still there. she checked the contents of her bag and everything was still there. And I was kind of a bit worried about walking back into the living room to see if anything else had gone, like my television or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And as I walked into the front room, it was a lot worse than that. There were 5, so the floor, just to sort of set the scene for you, it's old original oak floorboards that had sanded down and varnished. And across the sort of doorway to the kitchen, all 5 knives from my knife block, big cooking knives, I'm talking between 4 and 8 inch long cooking knives, were driven into the floor by sort of 2 inches into the floor. They weren't just sort of stabbed into the floor. These were driven into the floor with some force, and they were evenly spaced in size order across the doorway. There was
across the doorway.
So yeah, on the floor in the footings of the door where the doorway is. So you like don't cross this doorway sort of thing. I kind of looked at that and I stepped over the knives into the kitchen to think, what the hell's gone on here? I looked in the kitchen. There were 2 cabinet doors open, and one of the drawers was open, but nothing was missing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was missing from the house. Now, I've written in the book, and the stories are pretty much me saying, this happened, this happened, this happened, like a diary. And then at the end of it, it's me explaining my thoughts on it and saying,
Okay.
I don't know if this is paranormal or not. The door wasn't locked. There's a 2-hour window where somebody could have come in the house and done that. Why somebody would do that on a Sunday morning is beyond me.
Yeah.
But I leave it to the anticipation of whoever wants to decide, is it paranormal? Is it not? I genuinely don't know on that story, but I presume it probably is, because the knives were driven that hard into the floor that it would have made a loud noise to do that.
And you mentioned that was a hard oak floor.
Yeah. Yeah. And these knives, for me to get them out was quite a task. It was like sword in the stone trying to pull these things out of the floor. They were driven deep into the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to get all the knives out of the floor. So
and as strong and muscular and all as you are, could you have picked that knife up and jammed it through oak 2 inches?
No way. No, there's absolutely no way I could have done that unless you had a hammer or something to hammer them into the floor. There's no way that I could have done that by hand.
And you could not have not heard somebody hammering on a knife.
You would have thought that would wake me. I mean, I got woke up by the taxi outside and the door at 9 o'clock in the morning. So you would have thought I would have heard a hammer, somebody hammering 5 knives into my floor.
Yeah, no kidding. And felt it. I mean, the vibrations had to get through, because this is not a English castle. This is a regular home.
It's a 3-bed semi-detached house. So it's attached to another house. It's only in 1936, March the 25th, 1936 was the build date of the house. It's not particularly old in English terms. But yeah, just crazy. That genuinely, not a lot of things freaked me out in this house. That I didn't sleep for about 2 weeks after that.
Did you take that knife in the doorway as a warning?
Well, going back to the point about the lady who lived in the house prior. Now, Mrs. Tompkins owned this house from 1930, from the date it was built, from March the 25th, 1936. She loved the house and apparently kept it very well, and the windows were always gleaming. The garden was always fantastic. Apparently she loved the house. She was a lovely lady. Now, that was the first instance of something happened to a lady in the house. And I think this might have been her, because the next time that she appeared in front of somebody was my wife on our first date. So going back sort of 11 years, maybe 12 years now, we'd got back in a taxi, and similar sort of thing to the first day, well, the week before I moved in. She looked out the window of the taxi as I was getting some money out to pay the taxi driver and said, "Who's the lady in your window?" And she was in exactly the same bay window, doing exactly the same pose with her arms on the window, staring down at us in the taxi. And she was adamant and told me exactly the same description: woman in her 80s, short grey perm, white blouse, dark cardigan, piercing stare. That was the first night we went on a date, and she came back to the house. Now, the first night I left my wife now in the house, and I went out for a drink with the boys, I got a phone call about an hour later, and she'd seen the old lady as she'd gone to the toilet downstairs, the WC downstairs. And there's an old, like, sort of lean-to utility room at the back of the house, which was glass. And she walked into that room and looked up in front of her into the glass, and saw a reflection staring back at her that wasn't her. It was an old lady in sort of a white nightgown staring back at her, and she says it was the same old lady she'd seen in the top window. Now, she locked herself in the WC and phoned me screaming down the phone saying, "Come home. You've got to come home. I can't get out of the toilet." So yeah, that's to me, it seems like the old lady doesn't mind me living here, not so much women living here. Yeah.
Well, I've got to give your wife credit for sticking with you for 11 years with that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
I think she's braver than both of us.
Yeah, there's, like I say, there's only been sort of, if you read the book, there's probably 3 or 4 stories that are about me. The rest are actually about other people that have lived here or rented a room here, family and friends. Yeah.
And you have said you still haven't seen Mrs. Tompkins.
No, I've seen those knives in the floor. They were there when I went downstairs. I think the turning point for me when I really started, I'd seen the shadows, I'd heard the footsteps, I'd heard a voice in the house. That was probably the scariest night for me, because I was in the house on my own and heard a voice, which was like a whispered man's voice that said, "Come here," and that really freaked me out. But
I guess so.
Yeah, that's a story in the book that really, really creeped me out. But when I was sat with my wife one night, this was only a few years ago, and it was about 10 o'clock of the evening, and we were sat in the front room having a glass of wine and just discussing the day's events of what we'd both done. And suddenly the door handle at the bottom of the stairs, this is the door that we've seen the shadow go underneath, and we've heard footsteps walking behind there before. The door handle came down. Now, as the door handle came down, the door sort of creaked open. Now, this is a spring-loaded door handle. There's no trickery here. There's nobody behind it. But the door crept open sort of yay far, so I could sort of peek my head around and look into the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. And as I did so, I just said, "Hello?" And as I said hello, the door handle snapped up and the door slammed shut. Now, there are no windows open. It was a cold winter night. There's no windows open in the house. There's no drafts. I mean, the drafts wouldn't explain the door handle going down anyway. But I saw that with my own eyes. And I turned to my wife afterwards, after I'd gone to check and there was nobody there. I turned to my wife and said, "Can you just tell me what you saw before I try and explain what I saw?" And she told me exactly what I've just told you. And having 2 people there that witnessed the same thing is like the holy grail for this sort of stuff, because a lot of stories are, right, I saw this happened, I was on my own, and this happened. There's loads of stories in the book where it's not just one person involved. There's a few that have got 6 people involved, and it's just stuff that you can't explain. And that was a massive turning point for me in my head, to know full well that there's forces going on in this house that I can't explain.
Okay. How about the neighbors in the next house? Are they having any issues?
No. So I've got new neighbours next door. They've only been there probably about 8 months now. And before them, so in the 19 years I've been here, I've probably had about 6 different sets of neighbours, none of which have ever mentioned anything paranormal going on. The old chap who lives in the house down the road, the next house down the road, he passed away, bless him. But I did speak with him because he'd owned his house since 1936 as well. They were all built at the same time. And I spoke with him when I first moved into the house and said, "Do you know of anything sort of weird?" It's a strange thing to ask somebody, isn't it, for the first time, especially when you've just moved into a neighbourhood. And I kind of had to say to him, "Do you know of any sort of hauntings in the house? Anything weird ever happened in the house?" And he said, "Well, I know that Mrs. Tompkins' partner did die in the house back in the 70s, 80s. I don't think Mrs. Tompkins died in the house, but he wasn't certain. He said she owned the house when she passed away, just she passed away of old age. But he doesn't think she passed away in the house, but she owned it when she passed away." But he kind of just laughed it off and said, "No, I've never heard of anything haunting about the house."
But England is famous for their hauntings. As you
Yeah.
indicated earlier, it's a very old country. People have lived there a long time.
Yeah, it's normally public houses and castles and mansion houses that are the stories that you hear. But this is, I mean, you'll have heard of the Enfield haunting and
Mhm.
30 East Drive as well, are two very famous hauntings in sort of normal suburban houses. Mine is very similar. I look at those stories and think, mine's very similar. It took me a long time to actually decide that I was going to write the book and actually come out and say these things, because I don't know, a lot of people look at you funny, don't they? You could have some people that look at
Yeah.
you and say, you're crazy. These things can't happen.
Right.
But I know they've happened. I've witnessed them. I know they've happened.
Mhm.
And to get the book out there and raise so much money for charity is just amazing.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that and a couple more of your stories. I don't want to tell them all, but I do want to get a couple more stories because they are amazing. They're incredible.
Yeah.
But I'm going to run off here real quick, and I will be back in just a moment. If you'll hold on
Okay.
for just a second, Bill, I'll
Thank
talk
you,
to you in a minute. Okay, my friends, England, hauntings, obviously intelligent haunting, and a haunting that the ghost picks and chooses who she's going to appear before, almost as if she's wanting to scare someone in particular. And I'm wanting to get your attention right here, folks. So if you'll watch for just a second, I'll be right back. Okay, my friends, there's going to be more about the XCon and about joining up with what we've got here with the UnX Network. Do want to tell you we've got a date for XCon, we've got a location for it, and we will be talking more about that shortly. But I got to get back to Bill because, friends, I'm loving this kind of ghost story. Isn't this the right story for a dark and stormy night? Bill, you ready to start again?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the guy who drove you up, was he startled or a little frightened the very first time when you was working and he said he saw this lady? Was it getting to him?
He was kind of confused about it because as we drove up down the road, I quizzed him about it and said, come on, tell me what she looked like and that sort of thing. And he just was a bit confused when I said, but the house is empty. I know the house is empty. It's been empty for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
There's no furniture in there. Why would there be a person in there with no lights? There were no light fittings or anything in there. It was just a shell of a house.
Mm-hmm.
So why anybody would be in there of a nighttime staring out of a window doesn't really make any sense. But as I say, I kind of brushed that off and we didn't really speak about it after that. That was it. It was just a quick, she was in the window. That was that.
And then during the Monopoly game, the guy who saw her got so frightened, he spilled his beer, ran across the room, and hid in a corner, basically.
Yeah. And this guy wouldn't do that. I've known him since I was 11 years old. He's quite a strapping lad, and he's not somebody to show that he's a masculine guy, I would say. He's not the sort of guy to show fear. But he certainly did that night.
And he's shown himself to your wife now, who was so scared she hid in the bathroom until you got back.
Yeah.
Do you think she's picking out the people for maximum effect?
Possibly. I think the other sighting was my brother, who, and I've written about him in the book. At the time, he was 22. I mean, he's a big lad anyway, but he was 22 stone of muscle. I wrote about him and said he was feared by many. He's 22 stone of muscle, tattooed up to the nine, 6'2". He's not the sort of guy that you messed around with. And he's similar. He doesn't show emotion. He doesn't really show emotion to anybody. And he phoned me at 4 o'clock one morning to tell me that he'd basically seen the old lady. He phoned me to say, come downstairs. I need you to come downstairs now.
Okay.
And I was working the next day, so I was a little bit angry that I'd been woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But I came downstairs and he was the same. He was sat in the corner of the room, huddling his legs, and he couldn't get his words out. It took me a good half an hour to get out of him what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd been stood there. I used to have a dartboard in the kitchen, and he'd been stood throwing some darts, just having a nightcap. And he saw the old lady walk across the window at the back of the house. He just said at first he just saw sort of a glow in the garden and thought, what's that? And he sort of stopped what he was doing, put the darts down and looked up, and he saw this sort of glow come towards him, then realized it was an old lady. But my brother did know the stories about what happened before. But she walked straight across the window, stopped in the middle of the window and turned her head to face him and stared him down, then turned her head back round and went straight through the wall into the next door neighbour's extension to their house. And he just sort of threw himself backwards, sat down. He was sat in front of the fridge when I walked into the kitchen on the floor. And he was nearly, he'll hate me for telling you this, but he was nearly crying. He was that scared.
Uh-huh.
But I suppose you would be if you'd seen. I think I would be if I'd seen that.
Yeah, if you're not expecting it, and
no.
You gotta just narrow down on one. She stared him down.
Yeah.
She just stopped, looked him right in the eye, and then watched it.
Stared at him, just stared him straight in the eyes, and then she turned her head back around and went straight through the wall.
Into a neighbor's house.
Into a neighbor's house, yeah.
That has not complained or mentioned anything about it.
Nothing.
So, yeah, it sounds like she is picking her targets and terrorizing just certain people. I hate to say it that way, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And maybe she likes me living here, so I don't get any I don't get those scares, but I have been scared by other things. And the one going back to the voice, that was the scariest night for me.
Tell that story from the beginning, because when you mentioned it, it was intriguing.
So my mum and dad used to go abroad quite a lot, and when they went abroad, they used to leave their dog with me, and they had a border collie, sort of cheap dog, and she was a beautiful dog. And she used to, every night when you went to bed, she used to sit on the top step with a sort of head on a paws and fall asleep, and she'd guard the stairs every night. Now, that particular night, I was living on my own at the time, nobody renting the other rooms. I'd watched the TV. It was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I had one of these, the Swedish company that makes nice lamps and things. I had one of those white lamps in the front room, and it was sort of made out of paper with a wire frame. It stood about 6 foot tall, and it had a press pedal to turn the lamp on or off. I stood up and I looked at the dog, who was called Guinness, and I said, come on, Guinness, should we go up to bed? And I went over and I stepped on this foot pedal. The TV was off. The only light that was on in the front room was this lamp, and the lamp stayed on. And the first thoughts were the lamp's broken. I went over to switch it off at the plug. I sort of traced the cable back to where the plug socket was, turned the plug socket off, the lamp stayed on. I looked at the wire, I picked up the wire, and it was definitely the right wire. I took the plug out of the socket and the lamp stayed on. So I stood there with a plug in my hand, a lamp that's just a normal bulb in a lamp. There's nothing fancy about it. It was just literally a normal bulb in this sort of tall lamp. And I sent the picture as a picture message to a good friend of mine who's an electrician and said, can you explain this? Can this happen? And he phoned me straight away. Said, how have you done that? I said, I don't know. I said, is it possible? And he said, no, they don't have an internal power source. He says, if it's switched off or you've taken the plug out, it can't be on. I said, well, it is. I'm stood staring at it now. You can see that. Anyway, I put the plug down, and in my head, when things happen here, we don't normally have about 2 months of nothing, and then we have about a week of madness, and it sort of builds up throughout that week to something that's a bit worse than the last thing that happened. I went up to bed, left the lamp on. As I got into bed, I normally close the door because I do hear footsteps and things, especially around 1 to 3 in the morning. We hear footsteps quite a lot, or doors banging, or door handles trying to be opened. So I normally close the door to the bedroom
Mm-hmm.
to get a good night's sleep. This particular night, for some reason, I'd left the door just ajar. So it was pitch black, but there was a street light outside that was sort of beaming a beam of light across the bed. And I could hear a shuffling noise. Like the dog was, if you were to call Guinness the dog, if you were to say, come here or offer a treat or something, a hindquarters would wiggle.
Right.
And I could hear that noise. I could hear the shuffling noise of her doing that. And I thought, why is she doing that? Because normally she would just go to sleep with her head on her paws and she wouldn't fuss all night. She'd just guard the stairs. And as I'm sort of laying there contemplating, shouting her into the room because the door was ajar, I was about to say, come here. And as I went to open my mouth, I heard a guy's voice from the stairs, and it was definitely a bloke's voice as well, say, come here. But like a really creepy, whispered, drawn-out voice. And I froze. That was not because I thought it was paranormal, because I thought somebody had broken into my house.
Mm-hmm.
I completely froze, and I can remember laying there. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably split seconds before I jumped up out of bed, and I went into the wardrobe. I was looking for a weapon, and I went into the wardrobe, and I grabbed the rail out of the wardrobe, so all the clothes went everywhere. And I went out onto the landing with this rail in hand, a hollow metal rail. I don't know what that was going to do to me, but I kind of walked out onto the landing, and I looked over the dog into the darkness down the stairs, and there's nothing there, but the dog was still looking down the stairs with the hindquarters going. So I stepped over the dog and walked downstairs, and the anxiety to open the door into the front room at that stage, I picked up a golf club out of my bag. It was the 7-iron, because I very rarely miss with a 7-iron. And I picked up the 7-iron, and I went into the front room, and I went through every single room in the house and checking every door with a fist clenched with a golf club in my hand, in nothing but a pair of boxer shorts. I probably looked like an absolute nutcase. And eventually, once I checked all the doors and windows were locked and closed, there was definitely nobody in the house or could have been in the house. I went and sat on the sofa for about half an hour that night with a golf club in my hand. The dog didn't come downstairs in all that time. Now, she would follow me everywhere. Mm-hmm. Whatever was downstairs with me, she wanted nothing to do with it. And eventually, I had to go up to bed and try and get some sleep. But that was 100% paranormal. There was nobody there. I definitely heard the voice, like I'm talking to you now. I heard the voice. Right. But that was probably one of the freakiest things that's ever happened to me. That was very scary.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
So let's move on just a little bit here. We may come back to it if we've got the time, but I also want to be sure we hit that every penny, every dollar you're making on this is going to a particular charity. Do you feel like talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So my mom, bless her, was diagnosed with cancer just over 5 years ago. We lost her last May. She put up a very brave battle. It was a stage 4 cancer when she was diagnosed, and it's a very rare form of breast cancer. Now, when she started her treatments and her diagnosis and things, there was a cancer charity that were brilliant with her. They're called Cavendish Cancer Care. They're a small local charity. And they only get 2% government funding. So all the money that they get from people like myself doing this book, they need it for the families that are suffering with cancer. Mm-hmm. Now, before my mum had passed, I said to her that I'd been writing this book for 3 years, and I was pretty much ready to release it. I was getting there. I was doing the final edits with it. But sadly, she didn't get to read the final edit, but she was there during me actually doing the drafts, sitting at my mum and dad's house and doing the drafts and asking for the odd word where I was stuck on a phrase or whatever it might be. And they helped out a little bit with it, even when she was very poorly. But this charity was so good to her that I said that every single penny that I make from book sales or audio books, which I'm doing at the minute, that'll be completed soon, go directly to them. And I set myself a target of £2,500. And it's just gone over £21,500, which I don't know how many dollars that is, but it's probably
it's a healthy amount.
It's a healthy amount, yeah, and that's since October the 31st when it's been released. It's been an Amazon bestseller in 6 categories, and you can buy it on Amazon. Mm-hmm. You can find it on Waterstones online. Just search for The Lady in the Bay Window, or you can find me on Facebook as well. If you've got any questions about anything, you can certainly find me on there as well.
And under Facebook, you're actually under the title of the book, The Lady in the Bay Window.
Yes, Lady in the
So-
Bay Window, William
Okay.
Seagrave. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think you're doing an incredible job with this charity. You set out to make 2,500, and you're over 21,000 now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I'd say mission accomplished on that one.
Yeah. Long may it continue. It's still going very strong every day as well. So long may it continue.
Well, hopefully we can help you out a little bit.
Thank you.
You said your brother just recently stayed in your house.
Yes.
And the action started again. Is it because he was there and they had him scared before?
Possibly. So my brother really hates this house from the paranormal side of things. He cannot stand to stay in this house. But,
I understand that.
Yeah, and I asked him to come and look after the house for the week and look after the dogs because we were going away just before Christmas. And when I said things don't happen for a couple of months and then we have a week of madness, I missed the last one because we were away. But my brother was here, and it started on the day that we went away. So he texted me, and I think the first text message said, the fire alarm's making a silly beeping sound like it needs its battery replacing. And I text back and said, the fire alarms are wired in. They're not battery operated. Mm-hmm. And he then put, oh no, I've just heard somebody in the kitchen shuffling with the cutlery drawer, like somebody had gone in the cutlery drawer and was sort of rustling around with a hand in there. And he said, I think it's we call it the mad week. I think the mad week's starting. And then the next text I got was about 2 hours later. I can hear footsteps upstairs, and he was in the house alone. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm not going upstairs. I'm going to sleep on the sofa. Yeah, he didn't venture upstairs. He stayed downstairs and slept on the sofa that night. But he had a week of footsteps, banging, unusual noises around the house. He didn't see the shadows. He didn't see anything crazy like that. But yeah, he did hear a lot of noises and things around the house that shouldn't be there.
And you've heard talking. Have you been able to make out any of the words?
Oh, the only words I've made out is that bit where it said "come here," but I have caught on camera when we had one of the other chapters in the book was a paranormal investigation team came.
I wanted to ask about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a bit of a crazy night, to be fair. I can remember before they came around again, I didn't tell them my name and I didn't tell them the address. So I just said, just phone me when you're near this postcode and I'll direct you in, because I didn't want them to do any research before they got there. I wanted them to give me what they thought were facts about the house after the investigation. And to be fair to them, they did it free of charge because they knew it was for a cancer charity. And they also said to me when they arrived, we don't do any research before, and we don't want you to tell us anything about the house. We're going to investigate it. We'll tell you when we've done. They brought lots of gadgets and gizmos and things that I'd never seen before, and they placed them all around the house. And before they arrived, I can remember sitting in the front room and saying, if there are any spirits here, I want you to come forward and show yourself tonight. Because what I didn't want is them turning up and nothing happening.
Yeah.
And me looking like a fool, because it does happen. And as soon as they arrived, they had multiple devices, differing things that measured heat and movement and all sorts of REM pods and things like that. And everything, aerofluxes, everything went off. Mm-hmm. They had a really interesting night. And I said to him at the end of the night, what's your thoughts on the house? Then he said, it's really haunted. It's one of the most haunted properties we've been in, not for the amount of spirits here, but the spirits that you've got. He thought we had 3 spirits here. He said, you've got 3 spirits here. And he's not a medium, but this was through talking through apps and all sorts of things that he was using and doing different techniques. Right. So I think you've got 3 spirits here that are that strong that they will be able to move things, throw things, poltergeist activity. And there is genuinely a story in the book where I had an American coin thrown at me while I was in the shower. And if you haven't read that yet, you need to read that, because it's the last chapter of the book. It only happened to me back in, I believe it was March 22. But yeah.
Do you have American coins in your house?
Well, I didn't think I have. I've been to America. Just to sort of, long story short, I found one particular night on a Friday, I found an American 1-cent coin. And it was on the bedroom floor. There was no other coins there. I don't know why it was there. And I picked it up for some reason, I looked at the date on it and it said 2014. And I put it in the top drawer next to the bed. There's no other coins in there either. It was a sock drawer. But I put it in the sock drawer and I went about going to sleep. The next day, the Saturday, I went up to bed. My wife was already in bed. She was asleep. I walked into the bedroom, American 1 cent coin in the same spot on the floor. And I picked it up and woke my wife up and said, "Have you put this here?" And she said, "No, why would I do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm presuming it's the same coin I found last night." I'd not told her about the coin the night before. I said, "I'm presuming it's the same coin. It's got the same date on it."
Mm-hmm.
And she just said, "Just put it in your bedside table and forget about it. Go to sleep." So on the Sunday night, I'm walking up to bed, middle of the stairs. Now, I'd hoovered all the carpets that day because I'm thinking this coin's going to reappear and I want to know for sure that there's nothing on the floors. So I'd hoovered everything, including the stairs. As I walked upstairs, halfway up the stairs, there's an American 1 cent piece in the middle of the staircase. And I picked it up and it was a 2014 American 1 cent. I went and looked in my sock drawer. The coin wasn't there. And I woke my wife up again, which is not ideal to do 2 nights in a row.
She should be used to it by now.
Yeah. And she took the coin off me and said, "Just give it here. I'm going to put it on my side of the bed and go to sleep." And I went, "Okay." And I went to bed that night, Googling all night, why am I finding American 1 cent coins in my house? The majority of the consensus were spiritual people saying it's because somebody's telling you you're going to have a visit from somebody from America. The weird thing was, my friend who used to live here for 4 years, he rented a room here. He was coming back from America for the first time in 3 or 4 years the next week, and he was stopping with me. So I kind of thought, that's weird. But the next morning, things got stranger as I went in the shower. And I stepped into, it's a bath shower. So I stepped into the bath, turned the shower on, and I'm thinking about this coin. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm in the shower on my own. There's nobody else in that room. The door's shut. It's a glass panel, so I can see if anybody else is there. There's a slap on the back of my calf. And when I looked down into the bath, there it was, the American 1 cent piece. And I knew it was going to be the coin.
Yeah.
For some reason, I knew before I looked down, it was going to be the coin. And I picked it up and I was excited. I wasn't scared. It just excited me to say, "Oh, something's happened to me," rather than it happening to other people in the house. It's happened to me. But yeah, that story is brilliant. I'll not tell you the ending to that because that does get a bit weirder as well. But I want you to have a read at that because it's good.
Oh, wow. So how did it feel now? As you said, you were excited because you're involved in it.
Yeah.
So they were giving you a message, you think?
I think so. And the strange thing is, and this isn't in the book, a couple of months ago, about 3 or 4 months ago now, the same thing happened where I found 2 euro cent coins in the house. One was a 1 cent coin, one was a 10 cent European coin.
Okay.
And my friend she actually lives in Gibraltar now, but she was coming back to visit the week after. And when she arrived, she said she'd been living in Spain for the last week. So obviously the Spanish currency is the euro. So a similar sort of thing happened again. And this was, I found it, and we've got like a really old table downstairs, in like coffee table in the front room. And it was just I wipe that table every day without fail. As I'm walking around the house, I wipe that table every day. And it was just on the table, this tiny little 1 cent European coin. And I have no idea where it came from. Absolutely no idea. It's very strange.
Yeah, it is. And the story is absolutely incredible. Bill, why don't you remind us again the name of the book and where it can be gotten?
Yeah, of course. So the book is called The Lady in the Bay Window. It comprises 25 short stories, which are all true stories about my haunted home over the past 18 years of living here. 19 now, but 18 when I wrote it. And you can find it on Amazon. If you go onto Amazon, search for The Lady in the Bay Window, or on Facebook, you will find the book to purchase. Every penny goes to Cavendish Cancer Care. And
so far, you have raised over $21,000 for this cancer company.
Just over £21,500. So probably up there, $24,000, something like that. It's a huge amount.
Well, it's very charitable, very nice of you, and I hope we can help you out some.
Thank you.
Are you thinking of another book yet, a sequel?
Well, I've already got. I've just told you the
One
coin story
story,
about
yeah.
the euro coins. I've probably got about 7 chapters worth of noteworthy stories to write about now. So, I mean, it might take me a few years because I can't rush these things. They just happen. When they happen, I am writing them down. I'm writing dates down as to when they happen. So maybe one day.
Just out of curiosity, you said it was a well-known group of investigators that came to your house.
Yes. Oh.
Are they? Yeah, that was
Oh.
normal. I know that's.
Yeah, sorry.
Do they have a web page or a YouTube page or anything where people can maybe see this?
Yes, certainly. They didn't put the one on about my home.
Oh, okay.
Purely and simply because I wanted to have a little bit of anonymity in the whole thing because it is still my family home.
Understood.
But yeah, you can find Awakening the Paranormal. They're on TikTok, Facebook, and they've been doing this for years. They go to about 3 haunted locations per week, and they're really good set of guys as well. Really good set of guys.
Okay. All right. Well, Bill, let me just say, William Seagraves, author of The Lady in the Bay Window. And if you get some more good stories, I hope you'll come back if you do a sequel because your stories are stunning. They're just incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Take care now.
Take care.
All right, my friends, as you heard, Awakening on TikTok and all of those. Wow. Can you imagine coming downstairs and finding kitchen knives driven into an oak floor? Inches where it's hard to get them out. I mean, we're not talking, like you said, not sticking a knife in. That's taking someone with some massive strength. Got to be a frightening idea. But you heard Bill, he's taking it well. He's laughing about it. God, what can you say? That's the kind of haunting we like here. And my friends, I do want to remind you real quick of what is available if you become a member of the UNX Network. And it's simple to do. You go to unxnetwork.com, type in down a little bit on the opening sheet. There's a way to join. It's free. And what are you going to get out of it? Well, first off, you get access to the blog, which, guys, I'm telling you, it's really been coming out with a lot of neat stuff lately. We've had cube-shaped UFOs. We've had jellyfish-shaped UFOs. We've had Navy pilots coming out talking about that. Ghosts. I just had one. They just published an article I had written on what's known as the Phantom Barber of Pascagoula, which is a story in all of itself, but it's worth checking out. All of this comes in free just by being a member. Plus, once a month, you get access to the UNX magazine. Now, when I say access, I mean you can order it if you wish. You can get it in paper copy. But once a month, it comes to your email directly for free, and you can see an e-copy of it and download it, and it's all yours. The most recent one has an article I wrote on vampires in America. It had, as you can see, both of these magazines, this one, the darker one, has an article I had written on a battleship, haunted battleship, North Carolina. And there was other stuff here. There's a lot of really neat stuff going on, and this will cover a lot of it. The articles are written by some of the best in the business, and again, all free. You can join up, get it sent to you. You don't have to worry about going out and picking it up. I do order a paper copy if I've got anything written in it, just for my own collection. But you might as well join the UNX Network. Again, free. And, I got to remind you, just real quick, the XCon is coming back. We will have it again October 11th through the 13th in Springfield, Missouri. And I'll be there again, be lecturing a little bit, be doing some other stuff. Last time we was there, it's at the Oasis Hotel. Nobody told us the place was haunted. The guests, the speakers, the vendors, all together was watching shadows cross during the day in front of us. It was stunning. It was shocking. I think we're going to do some ghost hunting there next time. So if you want to be a part of it, come on in, check us out. There'll be more information brought up constantly as we're getting closer to it as to who the speakers are, topics, ghost hunts. prices, everything. So there's a lot going on. You ought to become a member so you can keep up on top of it. And I was very fortunate. Didn't lose power today. I was a little concerned about that. So I'm going to back on out. You all keep cool, keep warm, because it's mighty cold right now. And if you have anything like that happen in your house, like bills going through, let me know. I will be there. And until then, even if nothing's going on, you stay spooked. Good night.